Well, the death toll from a bombing attack in Syria's capital has now climbed. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights says the blasts have killed 74 people. That's up from 40. These buses and the Shiite pilgrims who were on board were the target near one of the oldest cemeteries in Damascus. The activist group says 20 of the victims were members of Syria's government forces. Well, across the border in Iraq, civilians are streaming out of the country's last major ISIS stronghold. Security forces are fighting to drive ISIS from western Mosul. Now, since that offensive began, Iraq says 100,000 people have fled, but thousands more are still living in the city under ISIS control. Well, as security forces push further into Mosul, they're uncovering just how much damage ISIS has done. Ben Wedeman visited a site that was once home to the city's most precious relics.
We're in the Mosul Museum, very close to an active front line. It was here that in February 2015, ISIS came and vandalized many of the artifacts here. Fortunately, many of the real ones had been moved to Baghdad before ISIS invaded the city in June of 2014. Now, this is what's known as a lamasu, a winged bull, a symbol of the might of the great Assyrian Empire. ISIS not only went through the trouble of knocking them to pieces, they also chipped off its face. Now, over here is the vault of the museum. What ISIS did was use some sort of explosives to make a hole, go down, and one of the soldiers here has been briefed on this museum, was telling me that they went in there to take away the antiquities that were inside, not to destroy them, but rather to sell them on the black market. There's no clear idea when this museum will be in operation again. The battle is still far from over.
And Ben Wedeman has just returned from Mosul and joins us now from Erbil, Iraq. Ben, fortunately, as I understand it from your reporting, much of the relics from that museum were actually moved before this offensive took place.
Yeah, originally, Linda, there were around 2,200 pieces in the collection in the museum. But in early 2014, before ISIS took Mosul, they were moved to Baghdad, not because there was any anticipation that something was going to happen, but 1,700 pieces were moved there because the Mosul Museum was going to be renovated. And in addition to that, ISIS in February 2015 put out this video showing them destroying, toppling statues, but many of those statues were gypsum replicas. They were fakes. So in a sense, despite everything, the final joke was on ISIS. Linda?
That is good news. Ben, just looking at the strategy that's the offensive underway in Mosul right now, one Iraqi general says it seems that ISIS fighters may now be showing signs of weakness. Could this be a turning point in the battle?
It's hard to say because when we were at the museum, we heard a lot of heavy fire. There were incoming mortars, and the Iraqis were firing back with tanks and mortars as well. And in fact, we were in this pretty much in the same location 2 days ago. There was less fighting, so it's really hard to gauge the level of resistance by ISIS. They are losing territory slowly, but they're not giving up much without a fight. Now, certainly what we do know is that the humanitarian situation in Mosul is getting ever more difficult. The city is now effectively cut off from the rest of the world, so no food is getting in. There's no electricity. There's very little in the way of running water as well. So that's going to be affecting the ISIS fighters as well. And we know that morale is starting to flag. That, for instance, we recently interviewed a woman here in Erbil who's in prison because of her connections with ISIS. Her husband was an ISIS fighter who simply had enough of it. He shot himself in the foot in order to get out of being thrown into the front lines day after day. We're also hearing from Iraqi sources that there's a widening gap between Iraqi ISIS members and foreign fighters with ISIS who the Iraqis resent for their somewhat arrogant attitude towards them. So it's hard to say how long this battle is going to go on, but Iraqi officials are saying perhaps another month. Lynda?
Wow, really, really tough for the people left behind in that city. All right, Ben Wedeman, good to have you with us. Thanks so much for your reporting.